Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Vienna, what a wonderful capital. And from our little capital next door in Bratislava, I'm John Barter. This is Ferdy Klaver. I'm British. You may hear the accent. And Ferdy is Dutch. Are we speaking in Dutch today or not?
I think I can try and they still can understand, but I wouldn't go for it.
Okay. Do we have our presentation up? Maybe we do. No. There we go. All right, super. So GlobSec will tell you a little bit about it, will tell us a little bit about us, and then we want to get to the real issues. We've been known for many years as more as a security, foreign policy think tank. But we do a lot more, whether it's fighting Russian disinformation, whether it's looking at energy issues and fighting climate change. Now, one thing is very clear to me. Simple fact. Climate change is the greatest threat to global security that there is, especially when linked to migration, starvation, and everything else is happening in the world. Now, I'm very privileged because I'm on my third career, and I'm sort of at the phase of now looking at what I do and trying to have an impact and make a difference. And Ferdy, just a question. Why did you join, as a Dutch national, this strange little organization in Bratislava?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. But first and foremost, it's a great adventure to be here in this region, of course. I mean, I also really like, by the way, and thank TPA for painting this beautiful ceiling just for this presentation, so for this event. But certainly also the spas in Hungary, the majestic mountains in Slovakia, the caves in Czech Republic, and of course the beautiful concerts.
Yeah, but there's a work element as well, isn't there?
There is a work element, but this is also really one of the perks. But also really, indeed, also what you mentioned, there's a very strong relation between the conflicts that we now see all over the globe, where we see that pirates and former fishermen, former farmers, they have empty fishing grounds and lands drying out. So we're actually fighting right now, those sort of pirates and those sort of terrorists. So there's a clear link there. Also, if you look at the population, the world population growth prospects, it's really quite troubling, especially in Africa. It's gonna go up to 5 billion people in 2100. So the refugee crisis we had in 2015, it's going to be peanuts in comparison to what's happening there. So I figured to go also here to this region, because it's a little bit more conservative when it comes to the migration topics. But certainly the sustainability angle is probably one of the best things we can do, and we are also partly responsible for. So by taking that sort of action, this organization allows me to do so. So how about you, John? Because you started as an intern, basically, at this organization. So.
Well, yeah, there's a bit of a story behind that, and I'll be very quick. So GlobSec was founded in 2005, and it was actually a group of students from Banska Bystrica who came and pitched to me the concept of GlobSec. And for 13 years, the company I worked for were the main sponsor of the organization, the first corporate sponsor, and we actually wanted them to not only focus on security issues, but focus on climate issues and the big issues across the region. And we have major conferences, which is the Bratislava Forum and the Tatra Summit, but we have a very strong Policy Institute team of researchers which are dealing with all this. So obviously, when I went for Career 3.0, I had an offer to go as GlobSec. I wasn't sure how I'd fit in the NGO sector. So at the age of 58, 2 years ago, I became an intern, and it was some of the best time of my life. And now I have to work a bit harder for a living, as we've been going through from one crisis to the other. But I would like to just talk briefly about GlobSec, not only as transatlantic, but our real credibility in Europe now, and the big move made this year with our board. And we're very, very lucky to have Wilhelm Molterer, your former Vice-Chancellor, as our chairman. And we have many, many other leading figures, such as Gordon Bajnai, former Prime Minister of Hungary. And this team, along with Anita Orban, also from Hungary, not a sister of Viktor, by the way, but she's heavily into sustainability. They guide us and help us, which is very important. And also across Europe, we have Carl Bildt, we have General John Allen in the US, and Michael Chertoff, who are big names, who actually look at the foreign policy aspect we do. So yesterday there was a meeting with your Chancellor, the Slovak Prime Minister, the GlobSec team, to discuss how Austria would really become part of the GlobSec phenomenon as a major, major partner. And that will be moving forward this year. So, and there's the slide I should have put up, but just anyway, right. Now, I want Ferdy to talk about some facts and why CEE, particularly countries like Slovakia, Slovenia, Austria, have to step up and make a difference. Ferdy, over to you.
So obviously, as we just mentioned, and also was actually touched upon in the previous presentation very well, we have a responsibility, every country, but it's also sometimes good to zoom in a little bit in the country. So just for fun, if you look at the total CO2 emissions in the EU, if you include, just for fun, Germany in the statistic of, and put them in the bracket of CEE countries,
thank you,
it's approximately 52% responsible. This region is for 52% responsible. Actually, Germany and Poland are the real outliers in that sense. As you can see, Germany and Poland are actually for more than a third of the total output responsible for all the CO2 emissions. And actually, if you zoom in on so what it's then all about, so just for the sake of the argument, there's these sort of coal-fired power plants in Poland and Germany. So one, for example, the one in Poland is the most polluting plant in Europe. There's a similar output as all the Baltic countries combined. And the energy generation is also approximately 28 terawatt. And I think this figure also came earlier in the first presentation, which is also the same energy output as Slovakia. So everything combined, everything. So which is quite a sobering picture. Luckily, it will be decommissioned in 2036. So that's great. But also, and in Germany, they will decommission all the coal plants in 2030. But certainly, this is also what we're up against. And also why the other countries in the CE region certainly also have a role to play, and actually also have a lot of best practices in that sense. So,
and I think it's a lot, Ferdy, about us shaming the Germans and the Poles to move faster. And that's what we believe we have to do. In the region, we have to step up, we have to join forces, we have to make a difference. And we're going to talk about how we're actually doing that. But actually, I want you to talk about the Romanians, because they're the good guys, aren't they?
Yeah, actually, when it comes to hydroelectric power plants, let's say. So, for example, there's here the dam. It's the largest dam in Europe. It's approximately 40% energy production of the coal plant. Mm-hmm. But it's a great one, also a different part of the Danube region, and I believe they also have 115 hydro plants in Romania, so that's also very good.
Yeah, they built in the last 50 years 115 hydroelectric plants. So we see that Romania is actually one of the good guys, and we need to bring Romania into the discussion. We need the Romanians, the Slovaks, the Slovenians, the Croatians who are really taking these things seriously with the Austrians to shame the others to move faster. Okay, now, the real question is, what are we doing about it? Well, obviously I've got Ferdy, so he's going to do quite a lot on it because I'm very lucky to have a team. And by the way, we may be based in Bratislava, but we have 11 nationalities on the team, so we're quite diversified. And the average age is 26, so I am the diversity hire. yeah, and typically about 70% of our team are female, and 50% of the management team are female as well. So we like to try and get on with things that are important. Now, Ferdy, run through this, please, and we've got a bit of time on this, and these are critical things we believe that we are doing in GlobSec with our corporate partners, with the authorities, across the borders of Central Eastern Europe. And we've been able to do this because when we were combating Russian disinformation, we were doing it in 18 countries. When we created the largest database of returning terrorists, we did it over 18 countries, and that database was given to all the European security agencies and the US. And so we do have a voice which we can use, and we do have a reach that can give us benefits. But Ferdy, please take us through this.
Yeah, so today is of course about energy, but also we focus on the two main, let's say, sector coupling appliances of this energy. So where's the energy demand coming from? So buildings is what's mentioned. So 36% of the CO2 output can be ascribed to buildings, so just leaking buildings. And mobility is 25%. So these are cars and these sort of things. So in total, it's 61% if you tackle those two, let's say, giants. So if you want to transition, we need to focus on these sectors as well. And of course, we have the core, which is the energy transformation. So what is really important for us, what we do with our platforms, with our top conferences, where we bring all the people together 2 times a year, so prime ministers, CEOs, associations, the commission, these sort of entities, is to accelerate and to have this sort of needed public-private dialogue in order to move forward. Especially in the next 10 years, it's going to be heavily important where we invest in, that we invest wisely. We can only spend the money once. There is a lot of money, but we need to do it in the right way. So, in order to reach the 2030 and 2050 targets. Energy transformation, of course, is the essence. So, and also what we see here in the region, we bring, let's say, like-minded companies, stakeholders, public sector from different ministries also together to talk about these sort of issues. So what we do, for example, on the energy side is to really also have a little look at the so-called geographical comparative advantages that every country has. So for example, it's easiest to explain with Norway. So Norway, they have a lot of funds, also due to their oil and gas reserves, which they can invest in a lot of renewable energy sources. They can do so, and it's actually not so impressive, because they had a lot of money because of the oil and the gas. And they have actually a sea coast, so for them it's very easy to focus on offshore wind parks, and also they can focus on hydro, which is also, let's say, their geographical comparative advantage. Similarly, Austria, of course, you have wonderful mountains, and you do a lot with hydro as well. You have pump storage, which is amazing. So you have a lot of advantages as well. This is different for some of the landlocked countries, such as Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. The mountains in Slovakia are different. They are more steep, so therefore it's more difficult to have pump storage, for example, or to focus on hydro. There's only a small part of the Danube there. Hungary is just flat, so it's very difficult, and it's also not so south in the Mediterranean where you have more solar power potential. So there, for those countries, it makes more sense to focus on nuclear energy as well, which is of course a difficult topic here in Austria, but you also have a different geographical comparative advantage here. So this is also one of the things. It's clean in that sense, not sustainable according to the taxonomy, of course, but it's also one of the things like what is their own pathway to move to a different type of energy in the end. So how can we move from, for example, coal? What is the position of gas, which is also a deeply discussed topic also in Brussels, and therefore also in the region. But of course, there's many positive things going on. So as I mentioned, indeed, so how can we focus on these two sectors, like mobility and buildings, where we also have, let's say, particular characteristics in the region? So if you focus on mobility, of course, you have the automotive sector, which is of Europe, which is very much centered in the DACH and the V4 countries. So it's very much about Central Europe. Slovakia actually has the largest car production per capita output in the world. So they produce 1 million cars a year, which is amazing. So also for them, because their industry output is 44% automotive, they also are very vulnerable to the changes. So when it comes to supply chains, but also when it comes to the green transformation of this economy, of this particular sector. So for them, it's also very natural to focus on the green elements. So for example, the batteries, the hydrogen, and also, let's say, some of the hurdles that the OEMs, the automotive companies are saying, this is why people are not buying electric cars yet. For example, the charging infrastructure, and of course, the labor force, will they have the right skills? And by involving everyone, we can actually tackle these sort of issues. So the batteries, so we established also the Slovak Battery Alliance together with Commissioner Šefčovič. Commissioner Šefčovič is basically the let's say, the godfather of the European Battery Alliance, really focusing on a more strategic, autonomous system. And yeah, in order to advance this topic, it's really necessary also to work together with these sort of members. So also some of the new battery companies work with us on this to not only have a Slovak battery value chain, so not only from the production side, but also the recycling element, so that we can actually move forward and take the necessary steps to green this particular sector. Charging infrastructure is really necessary as well. We also focus on this in the spirit of the investment priorities of the Recovery and Resilience Funds. Because what we don't want is that only Austria, for example, is building a lot of charging stations, but then Slovakia is not doing it, and Hungary is doing it again, so we don't have the green corridors that we all like, because of course we would like to use the Schengen zone and move around and see all the beautiful places. So, so we also focus on this to really make sure that all the, let's say, the priorities are not only national, but actually are sort of aligned. So that's what we do with the charging infrastructure element. It's really a really key topic. Labor force I've just mentioned, so also what is really necessary is not only to involve, let's say, the Ministry of Economy in the discussion, or the Minister of Climate Action, or whatever it's called in every country, but also, for example, the Ministry of Labor, because then they can already prepare the labor force with the right jobs. So this is also not to be some sort of a hurdle. Then, of course, buildings. CE region also is really quite typical when it comes to the, let's say, the building market. So the EU average of house ownership is approximately 70%, whereas some countries are even up to 95%, like Romania is like 95% home ownership. However, at the same time, you also see that there's not so many, because they own the house, there's not so many, let's say, savings available to actually focus on the renovation of the house. And actually, buildings is absolutely much like planting trees, it's the low-hanging fruit, because if you invest once in, let's say, a better energy label of your house, the mortgage of your house goes up, and your energy bill goes down. So it's really a low-hanging fruit. But yeah, so it's really quite difficult. So what we focus on here as well is not only on how do you actually renovate a particular building. So it really starts with simple things like a window and these sort of, with the window insulation, these sort of simple topics. And only later on you can focus on solar panels, because otherwise you just have renewable energy sources, but still the energy is going, just leaking out of the building anyway. So you see there, it's progressing quite slowly, but that's the key focus, but it's also not so costly, and it's quite doable if also the consumers are using their own budgets, let's say.
So Ferdy, I'll just wrap up.
Yeah.
I think we're there. Right. So the situation, what we want to really talk about is that GlobSec does not just have blah, blah, blah. We launch initiatives. So at the Tatra Summit 2019, the Slovak Battery Alliance was launched, and now that battery site is being built already and manufactured to build the latest generation intelligent batteries, the only intelligent batteries in the world for electric vehicles. We also launched that was 2018. 2019, we realized that energy transition for CE was going to be a real issue. We now had to join forces on renewables. We had to re-stimulate the development of renewables. There was a lot going on earlier in the decade, but actually a lot of friends of mine who were investing in renewable energy in Slovakia found it was easier to build in Finland or go somewhere else. So basically, we have to take best practice and make it easy to do. I think on mobility, I mean, this is very significant. There are only 660 charging stations in Slovakia. There are how many in?
66,000 in the Netherlands.
In Netherlands, yeah. So we got a problem there. So we managed to get 50 million from the recovery fund to actually start doing the infrastructure. One thing that's being launched as well is the CEE Clean Energy Initiative, which is going to be signed off by the President of Slovakia and the President of Croatia. And we're hoping that the President of Austria and the President of Slovenia will join. Obviously, the aim is to make that clear, clean corridor where we can actually drive to Croatia in the right way, quicker than just doing it as individual nations. On buildings, it's simple. Human beings are requiring more and more energy all the time. And if we're chucking a massive amount out the window through inefficient buildings, we'll never get there. And this is something we can do. And this is why at the Tatra Summit, we will launch the Green Mortgage Initiative, where there will be a different type of financing available for people. So that's really it from us. I would like to say that neither Ferdy and I eat meat. We did come by train and bicycle, and we are returning by bicycle to Bratislava. So we like doing our bit. But I would just encourage everybody to try and spread the word. And obviously for us, corporate partners are believers. Corporate partners are taking the responsibility. We are very lucky to stay on this beautiful planet for a few decades, but we need to have something worthwhile to hand over to our grandchildren, because at the moment the story does not look good. Are there any questions?
Please feel free to ask your questions. You can also ask them in German, and I'm sure Ferdy might understand them.
I can grab a headset.
I think.
Yeah, we can get the headsets.
We'll get our headsets if there's any questions in German.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Super. Thanks. Yeah.
Wobei, vielleicht können wir das Mikrofon mit Maringer aufdrehen. Ja, geht so auch.
Geht schon? Ah, ja. So I don't have to present myself. I was a little bit puzzled by your analysis that there is not a potential except hydropower and nuclear energy in Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary, because from a technical view, I see that there is potential, but I see it as a problem that there is no political backing for those resources. So do you see any potential to increase the, let's say, energy put into those new renewables in the near future?
Well, actually, it's an announced government policy to actually do that. Yes, Slovakia is investing in nuclear again, and there are increases being done, but there is alongside that is a clear requirement to invest in renewables, certainly in wind and solar. So yes, there is an ongoing. And obviously we have a responsibility to work with the government to actually make sure they get things right. And so that's what we take on.
And yeah, just in addition, it's so actually Slovakia, they just produced 2 plants, so which is a cycle of multiple years. And you just not, so they just produce it. But and also if you want to, you first want to move to the get rid of the worst plants, which is coal, and then the second phase would be gas. So that's where you want to move away from in the end. So if you want to reach the 2030 and 2050 targets, it's very difficult to, let's say I'm going to invest additionally in nuclear plants, of course. So that's a first, because you, for a plant to get your return on investment, it takes like 20 years or so. So you need to invest now to actually reach the 250 target. So that's difficult. However, if you already have the plants, it makes more sense to it than actually use it and not decommission it. And actually, Slovakia just produced 2, so why would you quit it right now? Plus, it's very difficult to have the alternatives.
Let's just talk about a pet hate of mine. I embrace nuclear, but there's an element I hate, and that's the export of nuclear waste. And I believe it should be banned in the world. Yeah, countries who go nuclear should deal with their own waste. I actually believe the same for domestic waste as well. I think it's horrendous that Europe are bagging up stuff and plastic and sending it to Indonesia to get there buried. It's something we should just outlaw, because that itself is actually wasting energy just doing it. It's just, people need to face their responsibilities, and this is what a lot of it's about.
Yeah. In a similar fashion, you also have with biomass.
Oh, biomass, I mean, come on, we're taking food away from people who are starving, yeah? So these are things that we have to look at very carefully.
Yeah, or we just, we import trees from Amazon to burn here, and we say it's net zero. So this is also happening, right? So, yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, looks like we get to escape. Yeah.
No, thank you. I think what you're doing is actually very important. So to combine all the activities in the region, as the countries are not that huge, and it's actually very necessary that they work together. And therefore, thank you for what you're doing.